This is part 2 of our fraction videos. So before I get into anything new today, I'm going to review what I recorded yesterday. So we are learning fractions. And a fraction is when you have a whole thing that's broken into smaller pieces. And I use the example of a pizza. A fraction's kind of like when you take 1 or 2 or 3 or however many slices of pizza out of the whole thing. Each piece comes together and creates the whole pizza, but if you take a piece away, you have a fraction of it. This right here is an example of what fractions can look like. And you can pretend it's a pizza, or we can just talk about it as the shape, because shapes can be broken into fractions as well. So when we have fractions, they have two parts to them. We have our top number, which is our numerator, and our bottom number, which is our denominator. If we were to make a fraction for the amount of pieces that are colored in this shape right here, I would have a top number and a bottom number. Our denominator, which is our bottom number, is determined by counting how many pieces make up the whole object. In this case, I have 1, 2, 3, 4. So my denominator is 4, which means there are 4 pieces total. My numerator depends on what is being asked. In this case, my numerator is going to be how many pieces in here are colored. In this case, I only have one colored piece, so my numerator is 1. My fraction for colored is 1/4. That means 1 piece out of 4 total are colored. If I were to make a fraction for not colored, I would do the same thing. Since it's the same shape, my denominator is still 4 because even though I'm looking at a different part of it, how many pieces are not colored, there's still 4 total. My numerator is the part that'll have a different number. Instead of counting my pink pieces, I'm going to count my white pieces. 1, 2, 3. So if I were to read this fraction, I could say 3/4 of my circle is not colored. 3 pieces out of 4 total are not colored. So what are some important things to remember about fractions? First, we need to remember that there are 2 pieces to them. We have our numerator, which is our top number. Put an arrow and say top. And we have a denominator. Which is our bottom number. And this one is how many pieces there are total. And the numerator, it depends on what's being asked. If you're looking at how many colored pieces there are, your numerator is how many pieces are colored in out of the total. Another thing that's really important to remember about fractions is if a shape is broken down into fractions, every piece is equal. That means they are the same size pieces. If the shapes are not the same size, then it is not broken down into equal fractions. You can't make a fraction if the pieces are not equal. And what I mean by that is if I have a pizza or a circle and I cut it like this, we can see that these shapes are equal. They're all about the same size. So I could name this. I could name these fractions. I could name that 1/4. But if I had the same shape and it was broken like this, we have a really small piece, kind of like a medium piece, and a really big piece. They're not the same size. So you can't make a fraction with that because fractions have to be the same size. And I'm going to show you why in just a minute. One more little vocabulary word that's important to know when working with fractions is what a unit fraction is. A unit fraction is actually pretty easy to figure out. All it is it tells you what one piece of any shape, what its fraction would be. So for instance, if I look at this circle right here, it's broken into 1, 2, 3 shapes. So if I were to pick one of these shapes, I would have 1, and there are 3 total, third. So my unit fraction for this shape is 1/3. That tells me what each piece individually would represent. So if I had this one, that'd be 1/3. If I wanted to do this one, that would also be 1/3. That one, 1/3. It's basically just when you look at each piece of the shape individually. Now another shape that you can deal with fractions, because it's not always circles, you can have rectangles like this. If I were to find a unit fraction for this, I'm looking at how much or what the fraction would be for each individual piece. So I'm going to look at just one piece. So my top number will be 1. When you have unit fractions, your numerator is always 1 because you're just looking at one piece in the shape. So if I'm looking at one piece, my denominator is going to be the total amount of pieces it's broken into. And these are all equal, so I can make it into a fraction. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So my unit fraction for this is 1/6 if I were to just look at what one of them would be. Something that's cool about fractions is you can take any shape, and as long as you break it into equal pieces, you can make your fraction pieces as small as you want. I'm going to show you. So you have these fraction strips. I gave them with your work. I think they were in front of your paper from yesterday. You can cut them out so you can easily move them around and see the fraction pieces. I colored mine and you'll see that. That way I can see the pieces that go together a little more easier, but you don't have to do that. But I'm going to show you how you can take one piece and break it into all different kinds of fractions, and they all add up. They'll all add back up to the original piece. So if I were to take my rectangle, this is one whole. That means it's just the whole piece. It's not broken yet. And I wanted to break it into 2 equal pieces, like this. If we look, we put this one right here, and it adds up to the same shape. And these pieces are the same size. That means they are fractions. If I break it into 2, I have 2 equal pieces. This would be 1/2 and 1/2. But you could also break the same shape into 3 pieces. And then you can see how these pieces relate to the halves. So if you look, I have 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. All of these are the same shape as the 2 halves and the 1 whole because they are all equal. These are all coming from the same piece. And you can keep getting smaller and smaller, and they will still fit as long as your pieces are equal and they're coming from the same shape. So you can keep going all the way down, and they will continue to all equal the same amount as your original shape because they all came from the same shape. It's like if I took this and cut it into 12 pieces, 12 equal pieces, you would get all of these down here. You'd have 12ths. And something I want you to notice is the more pieces you have, the smaller they get. So because these are broken into 12 pieces, they are much smaller than the ones that are broken into just 2. So the bigger your denominator, the smaller the piece. which in some ways you would think that'd be kind of backwards. But if you have a pizza, and I always relate fractions to pizza just because pizza is delicious. If we had a pizza and it was broken in, let's see how many pieces I can make in this thing. Oh, we'll just keep it like that. Let's say you were super hungry and there was a pizza which had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It was broken into eighths. Our unit fraction is eighths. Let's say there was that pizza and the same size pizza, but it was broken into fourths. You were super hungry, but you were only allowed to have one piece of pizza. Wouldn't you want to grab the bigger one, the one that's broken into less pieces because there's more space there? This one's broken into more pieces, so each piece is smaller. Since this one has less, the pieces are bigger. Works the same way with our rectangular fractions as well. Something you can do with these fraction pieces for right now, and then we're going to actually talk about it more later, is you can find different pieces that are equal to each other. If we look at just 1/2, we can find different fractions that are equal to this piece. And I'm going to show you what I mean. So if we had this piece, let me pick it up. You can look at that and know that it's not equal because they are different sizes. Let's check the fourths. The fourth doesn't fit, but look what happens if we put 2 there. It fits perfectly. That shows me that 1/2 and then 2 of these fourth pieces are equal. So you can go through and find different fractions that are equal to each other. We'll have more assignments later that go into more detail about finding fractions that are equal to each other, and I'll tell you what that means and everything, but right now it's a good intro. You can use your little fraction pieces, just put them on different ones and see what you get. Let's see if we can get any of these, how many 12ths would equal a 4th. Got 1, 2, 3, 3/12 equal a 4th. That's pretty cool. So with your fraction tiles, if you cut them out, I mean, you don't have to color them, but I think it makes it easier to see the different fractions and how they relate to each other. So you can cut them out and just play around with them. See what you can figure out. What equals to each other? What doesn't equal to each other? What do you notice about maybe the small pieces compared to the big ones? And let me know what you're figuring out with these. For your worksheet today, all you're going to do is look at these shapes individually, and you're going to tell how many equal parts it has. So, for example, this circle right here has 2 equal parts. And then you're going to say it is divided into, and then what the pieces are called. So if we have 2 pieces, it's called halves. And then you're going to say what one part is called. So if I had one of these pieces right here, one part is called 1/2. So you're just going to go through and do that for these next 4 shapes. And if you look at the video from yesterday, there are some hints about what each of these shapes is called when it is broken into however many numbers of pieces. So like 2 had a special number of halves. I go into that and I talk about what it's called when there's 3 or 4 or whatever number.